He kōna I purangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Kia ora, nau mai haramai ki te ao hurahanga. Hello and welcome to Our Changing World, ko Claire Kincannon tēnei. This week, we go in search of one of Aotearoa's most stunning plants, kākābeak, or Ngutukākā. Its clusters of bright red blooms, each shaped like a parrot's beak, make it a popular garden plant. But in the wild, Ngutukākā is barely holding on. Considered nationally critical by the Department of Conservation, only about 100 individual Ngutukākā plants survive in the wild, clinging to exposed steep bluffs where goats and rabbits can't get to them. But now, locals along the east coast, the kākābeak's last stronghold, are determined to reverse its march towards extinction by propagating wild plants to turn State Highway 35 into a crimson highway. Veronika Meduna joins them for the inaugural Ngutukākā Festival.
I'm ready.
Kia ora koutou.
While it's sad to think that a plant found only in Aotearoa is so close to the brink of extinction, this gathering is a joyful occasion.
Uncle, if you could do a paku karakia for our haringa, please.
In late September, when Ngutukākā was still in full flower, a busload of people came together at Hauiti Marae in Tolaga Bay to go on a tour of sites along State Highway 35 where locals are rewilding the threatened plants. Our guide is environmental champion Mere Tamanui.
All right, whānau, if we can just have some quiet, thank you.
Kia tau ngā manaakitanga o te rungaroa ki runga ki tēnā o tātou. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa. Te whai rito tātou ariki ui ukreichi me te aroa te atua.
And we hope to do some Ngutukākā planting within the new restoration of the kids' skate park.
A few minutes later, we reach our first stop.
Can we stop here? We stop here. So wahine to the front, I would say, and our tāne following behind. So we're here at Te Kura Kaupapa Māori o Mangatuna and ko te hukuwai te awa. I think they're ready for us. Ka pai.
As we come up to the school grounds, tall, gnarly Ngutukākā grow around the main entrance. Younger plants flourish along the driveway, all thanks to the tamariki who weed and control slugs and snails around their plants. The plants at this kura are among the oldest in this restoration project, grown from seeds that returned to Tolaga Bay back in 2012, when Tairāwhiti was celebrating the transit of Venus. They came all the way from the botanical collections at London's Kew Gardens. Just how Ngutukākā got to England in the first place is a central part of this story, and we'll get to it soon. But let's first hear from the tamariki at Mangatuna why this plant is so important to them, as manukai, food for birds, for their kāinga, or as a taonga, a treasure.
Pai nā Ngutukākā mō nā manukai.
Manukai.
He pānga Ngutukākā ki au. Nā te mea, he taonga, no te kāinga.
For me, I guess it was about reconnecting whānau ki te whenua, connecting people to space and place.
Mere explains why she got involved.
What is it? What are the taonga that you had around your area? What are those things? And how do we bring back that to connect people to come back and engage and connect and to be? Because we know that on the coast, we have a saying, the loss of people's connections to space and place results in the loss of your biodiversity. And so how do we connect people back to space and place? And through meaningful engagements like this, and they have multiple disciplinaries in them basically, to capture audiences or to capture the kids, that they want to come back, that they felt that they're hooked. So it's not what we do, but how we do it that matters for us. And ahakoa he iti, he pounamu. It can be so small but so meaningful.
people came to the Tairāwhiti Ngutukākā Festival from all corners of Aotearoa. Here's why.
Well, hi, my name's Helen and I've come all the way from Auckland to the Ngutukākā Festival.
Hi, I'm Carol. I too have come from Tamaki Makaurau all this way down to Tairāwhiti. I'm a subscriber to the New Zealand Geographic and I came across a piece about Ngutukākā, and because I had grown one and it was stunningly beautiful and it lasted about 2 years and I was besotted with it and wanted to show everyone this amazing plant I was in. And I found out today I was the first to sign up. I was first to buy a ticket. So I'm proud of that.
So you saw it and thought, I've got to come, I've got to go.
Yeah, really mad about it and talking to people at work about it. And a lot of them are from down this way because I work in a kaupapa Māori service. So they said, it'd be interesting to hear the whakapapa.
Oh, excellent. So you can take the story and share it as well.
I can take a little bit back. They probably know a lot more than they're letting on, but so that's...
And are you taking seedlings or seeds?
I hope to buy some tomorrow from the market.
So we've tried in Tamaki Makaurau growing them, and we're also looking at growing on the Kaipara Harbour as well. Yeah. We're hoping the climate will be good for that. Yeah. And what we've learnt is around the companionship that you add to for the shrubs as well, so it helps them grow. Yeah.
As we head to our next stop, Hinetamati Marae at Inaugura Bay, I catch up with more Ngutukākā fans.
Kia ora, I'm Emma Geeson and I'm here as a Planting Partnerships Manager for Trees That Count. We support projects all over the country and it's a real treat to get to come here and play a small part in Graham and Medi and their team's vision to bring the Ngutukākā back to the coast and create this Crimson Highway, really exciting vision that we're just keen to help support in any way we can. And obviously up the coast here, you see the real front line of bad choices in land use and the impact on the communities here, and seeing the teams here and the Raukumara Paimoanga team really leading the charge in looking after the ngahere and restoring these precious species, taonga species like the Ngutukākā, and doing it their way and just their passion and hard work is really inspiring.
Kia ora, I'm Steph Gardner. I am a local of the coast, live in Whangarā, just down the way. I am a technical advisor for Trees That Count. Work across Tairāwhiti, helping landowners with their native forest planting projects. So the Ngutukākā project is one of the ones I work with. I feel very privileged to work with Graham and Medi. They have just so much knowledge. They're doing an incredible job creating this Crimson Highway and promoting this species that really needs our help. It is the tastiest of the natives.
Everything will eat it, right? Except possums, I gather.
Well, yeah. Apparently not so much possums, but everything else. So it's so hard to get it established in a planting project, and obviously so hard for it to grow in the wild where you don't have predator control. So this is really significant what they're doing, and I see it actually in other planting projects across the region being inspired and doing their own Ngutukākā plantings, and and then spreading that knowledge of that it actually takes so much to look after it and help it establish and remain alive.
Along the way, we stopped to plant a few Ngutukākā on the side of the road before we finally reach Inaugura Bay and its beautiful Hinetamati Marae. It's here that the story of the loss of Ngutukākā began more than 2.5 centuries ago, when Captain Cook's Endeavour dropped anchor in the bay in 1769. This is one of just a few sites where the Endeavour's botanists, Joseph Banks and Daniel Solander, spent time on land to collect plants. There's nobody better to tell this story than Graham Atkins.
Ko hikurangi te maunga, ko waiapu te awa, ko Ngāti Parau te iwi, te whānau a pōkai te hapu, no tikapa a wau, ko Graham Atkins tōku ingoa.
Graham is a botanist with a passion for native plants. He's worked for the Department of Conservation in Tairāwhiti for 3 decades, often in search of the rarest flora. and now he leads several restoration projects, from the Raukumara forest that rises between his iwi, Ngāti Porou, and neighbouring Te Whānau a Apanui, to precious threatened species like Ngutukākā.
Yeah, the story of these Ngutukākā, the ones that are just behind us, they're a little bit extra special. I'm sure people have heard little bits and pieces of what it's all about, but back in 2012, they had the Transit of Venus celebrations in Uawa. That was all down at the wharf, and part of that celebration was that they wanted to have a whole day dedicated to planting native trees, and so on that theme, the plan was to turn one side of their river from the river mouth back down to the main bridge in Uawa with the same plants and trees that were growing when Banks and Solander and the rest of the crew, Captain Cook and them, were here in 1769. With the relationship that we have, or that I've had with Dame Anne Salmons, she was able to get us a list through her contacts with Kew Gardens. She was able to get us a list of plants that they had in their possession that were from here, and right at the top of the list was Ngutukākā, and so yeah, I was excited about getting the Kew Gardens plants, and so basically we planted a lot of them around the kura in Tolaga Bay in Uawa, and I wasn't happy with the site that they picked because it was right next to huge flax plantations, and just on the other side were all acres of driftwood on the river bank, which is just classic snail habitat. And so I told them that not to put them there, and I don't even think the kākābeaks lasted one weekend. So, but we're lucky that one of our mates from the Polytech in Gisborne, Ron Taipa, he managed to get some plants, and they ended up in the possession of the kura where we were this morning at Mangatuna. At least that was an insurance population. We did the genetic testing on those Kew Gardens plants to sort of see if there's any merit to that they were plants from here, and they were pretty much genetically identical to plants that still grow up there. So yeah, so the plants there behind us, those are them. We planted them 252 years ago to the day that they were taken from here. We planted them back.
Even though you can buy Ngutukākā in gardening centres, that cultivar represents a tiny slice of the plant's genetic diversity. Genetic wealth is with the remaining wild plants. Graham knows exactly where the last Ngutukākā survivors hang on in the wild and why they are struggling. Being part of the pea family means that every part of these plants, the leaves, flowers and seed pods, is edible and irresistible to anything from snails to feral goats. That's why this project focuses on returning Ngutukākā to homes, marae and school grounds, where they can get a helping hand from people to protect them from being eaten.
I've been, working with Ngutukākā in a professional space for about 30 years. So you can look to behind us, the big high bluffs up there. There's still Ngutukākā up there to this day. So with getting the plants, the various plants that we got back from Kew Gardens, and the work that I've done with the kākābeak recovery group. Back then, 30 years ago, there was 200 plants that we used to look after in the wild. Today, less than 100, so that's a worrying trend. So part of the work we done, we got all the known wild plants populations, had their genetic fingerprint taken, just to see if they were closely related or not, and it was or not, because the populations are so small and separated by big distances, there's no gene flow happening.
Banks and Solander, the botanists and collectors on the endeavour, took more than 300 species from New Zealand for their herbarium collections. But locals also taught Captain Cook and his crew how to use plants to stay healthy.
Plants and the parts that plants play in bringing people together is sort of understated, and so just to sort of paint a picture, when the Endeavour was in town, so it was blown southwest, so the Endeavour was on this side of that island out there, in the lee of the island, and it was the 21st of October, and they rowed ashore. So when they came ashore, the soldiers would have been on the oars, and Banks and Solander stepped ashore, and they had a more sort of hospitable welcome than they did down in Tūranga, and that was because the locals knew they were here by then, and so they spent 9 days here, and so I think they done their biggest botanical collections and animal collections as well, and not long after they came ashore here, one of the tohunga whose speciality was the medicinal plants, he noticed that a lot of the sailors were suffering, and what they were suffering from was scurvy. So that's if anyone that doesn't know, is a deficiency in vitamin C, and so the tohunga knew that some of the plants that were grown along this coastline, and that's your coastal cress, or they call it a scurvy grass, and there's a few others, the native celery that still grows along here today, and the spinach, they're all high in native spinach, they're all high in vitamin C. So they managed to convince Captain Cook to try this, and so he was trying to get his sailors to eat it, but they wouldn't eat it, and so he had to eat it first, and then all of a sudden it was nice kai, and so they all started eating it, and the transformation from suffering from scurvy was pretty much overnight. So that's sort of an example of how plants can build relationships. And with the Ngutukākā, back then, October the 21st, and they noticed them flowering around the natives' dwellings, and so to me that was because some of our marae are just buildings plonked in a grass paddock with not much going on around them as far as landscape plantings, so that they noticed them exactly like that, and yes, maybe for aesthetic reasons they look pretty, but I think not just for that reason alone, because as our manuhiri have seen over the last couple of days, those plants will be covered in nutritious pods. So yeah, that's probably the main reason why I reckon they had them planted around the marae. It's just free food, in a land that's lacking in natural vegetable proteins. Our tupuna would have made big use of all of that. As well as back then the forest would have been dripping with birds, and you can just guarantee that tui's kākā were a big pollinator back in then. Hihi, that's the stitch bird, and our bellbirds would have been all over those plants, an easy feed.
Restoring a plant to its original home is about more than just botany. Ngutukākā was once so bountiful, particularly in Tairāwhiti, Te Orevera and Te Taitokarau, that people cultivated it, brought it as koha to other marae and traded it throughout the North Island. For many marae, Ngutukākā held symbolic meaning, and it's this cultural importance that the Ngutukākā project is revealing now.
Kia ora, ko hohepa wāinga tōku ingoa, he urio no te Tairāwhiti whānui, te whānau punui me Ngāti Porou. My name is Hohepa Wainga, and I am from the East Coast, Iwi, Ngāti Porou and Te Whānau Apanui.
And what got you involved with Ngutukākā?
With Ngutukākā, so I've worked closely with Graham recently through another project called Te Whakapau Ururoa, the myrtle rust response team here on the East Coast, Te Tairāwhiti. So naturally, because you work with Graham, he talks about all things to do with all the projects he's part of, which is pretty much everything to do with Taiao environment here on the East Coast. So he started talking about Tairāwhiti Ngutukākā and how they're wanting to bring the Ngutukākā back to the East Coast, really, into the hearts and minds of the East Coast iwi, really.
Hohepa engages schools to raise the profile of Ngutukākā in its last stronghold, and he says both iwi are rediscovering just how treasured this plant once was.
now that we're looking very closely at our marae, we're actually finding designs that stem from Ngutukākā, in particular on our, within our marae, outside our marae, and within the carvings, within the paintings and other artworks, so which we didn't realise until we started seeing the designs in places like in Ngāti Porou, and then going to Te Whanapunu and seeing the same symbols utilised there. So with that in mind, we knew that they must have been here, and it must have been a plant that would have been found right throughout State Highway 35, the east coast, from Ngāti Porou all the way around to Apanui.
And that's the goal, to bring it back to that level.
Bring it back, yes. And so we've already done some plantings over in the Apanui side at some of our marae. My marae, Kaiwaitongohia marae, will be receiving 200 to plant on our marae, because red is one of our significant colours from our marae and our hapu. Our local rugby team, the colour is red and stuff like that. So having a red plant planted on our marae will be beneficial.
So it's a bit of both. It's a conservation effort to bring a plant back, but it's also cultural renaissance, or for want of a better word, a cultural
representation, I guess.
Yeah.
Cultural symbol for us.
And these are all wild plants, right? So all the plants you're getting are from the
seeds from the wild plants. I believe every single Ngutukākā that is seen anywhere around the country mostly would have come from seeds and cuttings of the wild lot that are found in Tokomaru Bay there.
And it's time to head back to Wawa or Tolaga Bay. Tired, but inspired. One of my fellow travellers is Natalie Robertson, an artist, photographer and associate professor at AUT in Tāmaki Makaurau. Her research and art bring her back to her ancestral lands in Tairāwhiti.
We're currently working on a project that highlights threats to the environment, particularly plant species. So for me, any opportunity to come and support the work that Graham's doing, I'd gladly drive the very long drive that I did from Tāmaki Makaurau to here in Uawa at Hauiti Marae. So it's been really fantastic to come here and to see all of the different ways that people are intersecting with, around and bonding around Ngutukākā. And for us, the Ngutukākā is such an amazing plant, but it's also one of our patterns that we see in kōwhaiwhai. So right now we're in the most beautiful wharenui, ruakapanga at Hauiti Marae, and we're surrounded by the most extraordinary kōwhaiwhai, whakairoa, tukutuku. And when we look at these patterns that we see in tukutuku particularly, it's a very well-known one called Ngutukākā. And for me, it was actually the first ever design that I had tāmoko with. And so that Ngutukākā design, was the first ever markings I ever had on my body. And so I feel a particular affinity to the way that Ngutukākā unifies the ecological world with the arts, and how that is an ancestral story that is so significant and important to us.
For Graham, the Ngutukākā Festival is the culmination of years of hard work. But he never tires of work that lets him discover and restore threatened native plants.
That's like the dream job, really, searching for plants, especially ones that are rare these days. And so it's like finding gold to me. And you get into the management of them and you sort of realise that it takes a bit of effort to keep them around. Yeah, in Ngutukākā for me, there's so many threatened species. I think there was like 4,000 nationally, and a fair swag of those will be plants. And so most of our plants don't have the pulling power that our kākāpō and kōkako and kiwi have. So our poor plants miss out. Ngutukākā is like the poster boy for threatened plants in general. And, if we can't get a level of support or sympathy, then I worry about our threatened plants in general, because if Ngutukākā can't do it, it's such a charismatic species, I'm not being one-eyed or whatever. If Ngutukākā can't do it...
It looks like Ngutukākā can do it, though.
I agree. People have come from near and far with that interest in plants, and Ngutukākā. It's pretty overwhelming, really.
A big thank you to Graham Atkins. botanist and the driving force behind many conservation projects in Tairāwhiti. Thanks also to environmental campaigner Mary Tamanua, Hohepa Wainga from the East Coast Myrtle Rust Response Team, artist and associate professor at AUT Natalie Robertson, Emma Gisson and Steph Gardner from Trees That Count, Tamariki at Te Kura Kaupapa Māori o Mangatuna, plus the festival attendees who spoke to Veronika. This episode was produced by Veronika Meduna with help from me, Clark and Cannon, and Ellen Rikers. Sound engineering was by Phil Bench. Learn more on the web write-up for this episode, which you can find at rnz.co.nz/OCW. Te nā koe I whakarongo mai. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Clark and Cannon. Have a great week. Kia pai te wiki.